Number one, probably the most important on the whole list, is that baggy clothing is really on trend right now. This goes for tops and bottoms, but especially bottoms. So if you look at like photos of stylish people, if you look at photos of how they dress, or if you look at them creepily as they're walking around, you will notice the big baggy clothing. And this has to do with the trend for preference for vintage and retro, especially 90s era stuff. This carried over, but just generally this seems to be the prevailing aesthetic, is big, flowy, boxy clothing and sometimes comically oversized clothing, which is kind of a parallel and slightly divergent trend, which is just the crazy big cartoon character oversized clothes, like noticeably way too big clothes, are kind of, I think, fairly cutting edge right now, but becoming more and more common. So like huge cardigans, huge suit jackets, or really grotesquely oversized t-shirts or big pants. The thing that I would like to do with this video would be to splash up images of these things, but these are all fairly recent trends and I don't want to tread upon copyright. So I encourage you just to Google image search what I'm talking about, or just look at like style blogs or style Instagrams or something. I know that's not the ideal solution, and that is asking you to do a little bit of work, but it'll be worth it because you'll actually get a better mental picture of what I'm talking about than just if I showed you like a couple images. And I just don't want to roll the dice. I'd have to use Creative Commons images, which suck and are out of date anyway. 90s era is still really popular. Apparently it's not as popular as it was like a year or 2 years ago, but it is still very on trend. This goes for graphic t-shirts. This also just goes for general aesthetics. Again, the baggy jeans, big baggy jeans. I think rave gear is pretty popular. This information is coming both from my own experience and observation as someone who kind of peripherally cares about fashion, not all that much personally, but I care about it insofar as it makes me money as a clothing seller. And also I watched a ton of YouTube videos and read a bunch of articles before shooting this video. So this is what is, to my mind, the best, most up-to-date information that I can decipher, but it is tough because this is a very important note. Apparently, fashion is way less codified right now than it was even a couple years ago. And when I first started learning about clothing, it was pretty predictable what men's clothing would be popular or preferred by fashion-forward people. Now it is all over the map. It's like all these different decades put in a blender, and it's this horrible mulligan stew of mismatched weirdness, and there are no longer any hard and fast rules. I think within certain specific subcultures there probably are, but for an outsider looking in, just trying to figure out what people in their early 20s are wearing, it's just a complete free-for-all. 70s also is becoming increasingly popular, and I've known this for at least a year now. This was more true of women's fashion. It seems to be becoming more and more the case with men's clothing too. Certain color combinations, very like 70s color combinations, I think like ochres and oranges, browns, and also certain kinds of fabric like knit fabric or crocheted fabric, and certain cuts of clothing. So especially flare leg pants, I heard from multiple sources, are beginning to become popular and will continue to become popular as we progress in time. Hooray. So bell bottoms and flare leg pants for men are going to become more popular. I would have to assume that vintage, like 70s vintage pieces are going to increase in value, especially stuff like I just described. Knit polo shirts, meaning the big knit, like the retro or vintage knit or crocheted polo shirts, seem to be super popular right now. Same goes for that kind of fabric being used for short sleeve and long sleeve shirts. Similarly, not quite as commonly referenced as the knit polo, but talked about a lot, was the bowling shirt. It seems like the examples that I saw in these videos were fairly brightly colored, like reds, and they had the big stripes down the middle, like the cream or white stripes. I get the impression that bowling shirts, along with something called tablecloth shirts, which are almost like granny core type, like embroidered or crocheted short sleeve shirts that look like women's shirts, but they're men's shirts. These are a little more fashion forward than Hawaiian shirts. I don't know how popular Hawaiian shirts are with this crowd anymore. I couldn't get a clear beat on it. I think stuff like this that kind of fits that niche, but is slightly off-brand of the Hawaiian aesthetic seems to be more preferred. I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong on a lot of this. I'm not like a style or fashion expert. Light wash denim, both in terms of tops and bottoms. Dark wash is, or at least has been, to my memory, advocated for really heavily for like a professional look or a slightly dressier look. The light wash definitely skews more youthful, and again, like light wash, baggy jeans, like vintage jeans, 90s jeans, should do well, and they have done well for me, really well on eBay and other platforms too. Vests, especially sweater vests, appear to be very, very on trend. I would have to guess that the knit vests are going to be probably better sellers than the formal suit vests. Although there are certain brands like John Varvatos that I've done great with on those button-up vests. They're a little tougher to sell as standalones, or have been in the past. That might change as they become more popular. Sweater vests, both in terms of pullovers and button-ups, are apparently really popular. I heard those mentioned and read about those many times. Varsity jackets, especially vintage, true vintage varsity jackets, a lot of people are talking about as being very, very on trend. And these are not that easy to find. I found a handful of them, but they get snatched up out of the thrift stores really quickly. So maybe this is like a good thing to look out for at garage sales or estate sales. If it's for, I would have to venture a guess, like a NASCAR Letterman's jacket is a total no-brainer if those exist. I assume that those exist. So the weirder stuff will definitely be worth more money, but even the more plain type pieces should do really well. Outdoor clothing, which apparently I learned today is referred to as gorpcore in the fashion world, is very popular, has been very popular, will continue to be popular. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the safest areas to invest money in out of all of men's clothing. It appeals to so many different people, both for purpose and aesthetics. It's been just solid forever, and it should continue to be popular, and everybody says that it is still popular. GORP is an acronym that stands for Good Old Raisins and Peanuts, which is a trail mix joke. So it's like crunchy, wearing a North Face jacket or like a North Face puffer, Patagonia puffer with some streetwear stuff, mix and match. This is really popular. Not a whole lot has to be said on this front. I've done a video in the past that's like the best outdoor clothing brands to know. It's like a tier list video that will be good to watch if you don't know anything about it. A big broad strokes note is that big bright colors, bold designs, weird visually striking pieces are becoming more on trend. It appears to me to be a refutation of the minimalist aesthetic that's been so popular, of the earth tones and the beiges, the whites, blacks, basic, visually uninteresting clothing. All over print, like big. I've always done really well with big all over paisley stuff. I don't know if that falls into this bucket, but like the big color blocking, bright colors, weird patterns. And this also fits in with something called maximalist fashion, which definitely is bucking up against the minimalist fad, I guess you could call it, of covering absolutely every inch of your body with something that is like eye-catching. So lots of jewelry, like tons of rings and chains, and mismatched patterns, clashing colors. I don't know what counts as maximalist or not, but this is a growing trend of just really loud, tacky, crazy stuff. It's worth mentioning too, the jewelry is becoming more and more popular. So rings and especially chains, like chain necklaces for men, are becoming more and more accepted and sought after. I don't sell any of that stuff just because I don't know what I'm doing with it, but that might be something to look at if you have more knowledge than I do. I only heard this cited explicitly a couple times, but I observed it a lot over the course of the research for this video. Pleated pants, pleated bottoms, pants and shorts appear to be pretty popular now. Just a few years ago, pleats on pants and shorts were considered like a complete fatal fashion faux pas. And now I just see it all the time. Plaid flannel shirts are still in. They never really went out of style as far as I can tell. Especially big checks, like big plaid patterns. I've talked about black watch plaid before. I don't know how on trend that is. That's my favorite plaid to find. That's the dark green, navy blue, and black plaid, the tartan plaid. This also goes for outerwear, so plaid jackets and shackets, which are really heavy shirts that you can wear as a jacket, or hybrid shirt and jacket pieces. Should still be good. These will also be more popular going into fall. Cargo pants still also popular. I think there's a trend away from the big chunky Y2K era cargo pockets, like the big conspicuous ones, towards the minimalist, slimmer, shorter, like narrower or flatter cargo pockets that are more like tactical clothing type cargo pockets. Sort of has to do with the 70s thing, probably has a lot to do with the 70s thing. Big point collars, big like broad and big collars on shirts and jackets are apparently in. And patchwork stuff is another thing that fits in with this push towards the 70s. Patchwork, just Google image search it. You don't find it that much, but when you do, it's a great keyword to have in your titles, and it's been popular. It's going to continue to be popular, so they say. So those were like the big bullet points. As you can see, this is two sides of this crumpled printer paper. There's so many fashion tips. Some of it conflicting. People are saying big camel overcoats are going to be great. Other people say avoid them, so on and so forth. So it is confusing. It is getting more and more confusing, and it takes more and more specialist knowledge. Do you have to know these things to make money selling men's clothing? No. Men's clothing is more insulated against changing trends than women's clothing, but that's becoming less and less stable ground. And the more comfort you have even considering this kind of stuff, the better it's going to be for you. You know, knowledge is power, knowledge is money. It can't hurt just to keep slightly abreast of this stuff as it develops. It does make my skin crawl. I don't care personally, and listening to these fashion YouTubers is fingernails on a chalkboard for me. But they have the knowledge, and they also have the audiences, so the people who spend up for this kind of clothing are listening to them. So it's good for you to listen to them too, so that you can receive all the marketing signals that are being sent out to these buyers. So you can be aware of them, and so that you can cater to those perceived needs. The majority of people alive in the world also do not give a shit about fashion, as you and I probably don't. But just because we do not give a shit doesn't mean that the buyers don't. And the buyers are the ones with the money. These considerations become more important when you sell on specific platforms that cater to them. Them being, I would say, guys between the ages of like 12 and 35. Depop stands out to my mind. If you have rare that's another one that I should include. Vintage t-shirts are perennially safe money, especially pop culture, NASCAR, nature. Depop caters to that specific buyer base. Whatnot, I think there's a great opportunity to do targeted auctions. If you're a Whatnot seller, if you accumulate a bunch of this stuff over time and you market your or promote your Whatnot auction to the right people, I think you can make a killing. Just platforms like selling on Instagram. I don't know if you can sell on TikTok. You probably can. If you're selling through social media, I think this becomes even more potent. It does work for eBay too. It's just good to be aware of where people are looking and where the trends are going, because even though it's just the fashion forward Zoomers and etc. who are caring about this stuff now, that means that a couple years from now, the guys that are shopping at the mall are also going to care about it. So it's good to get in early. Brand is still king. Brand is still the most important thing, unless you are really tapped into a buyer base and you have an audience of people that you can show something to that's unbranded or off-branded, that's aesthetically perfect. Another reason why Whatnot is a good thing to do. If you're not that person, if you're just marketing to eBay, then brand is still king, and keywords, knowing the right keywords to target those buyers to know some of this terminology is really, really important, because you have to drive search traffic to these items. And even if they are aesthetically perfect, if you don't know the keywords, if you don't reach out and touch someone, then no one's gonna touch you back. Hope this helped, clarified things. Hope it was helpful. Appreciate you watching.